Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is utterly meaningless.
Hey, you're quoting from Ecclesiastes, right?
Yeah,
I noticed that the word meaningless is repeated a lot of times in that book.
yes, you're right. But do you know that there are more than one idea behind that word?
Do you mean the word Havel?
Yeah,
Enlighten me, O wise one.
the meaning of Havel in Hebrew actually means vapor. The translation of Havel into meaningless or vanity does not do justice to the word.
Yeah, when I think about it, vapor is not nothingness or emptiness. Vapor is not meaningless as well. Vapor does exist because we can see vapor when water is boiled and we can feel the heat from the vapor. Vapor is also not meaningless because it has been used to power up machines and engines since the 17th century.
Wow, you know your science, huh? Therefore, when the author uses the word vapor, he's using it as an imagery to point to its characteristic. In Hebrew culture, vapor has a few characteristics which include elusiveness, temporalness, aimlessness, unsatisfyingness, and filthiness.
But how do we know which meaning is the author referring to throughout the book of Ecclesiastes?
You are thinking critically, as how SBCians should. The answer is context. Just like English, most of the time the meaning of a word is determined by context. For example, the word can, C-A-N. The context of the text around the word will inform us if it means able to do something, like in I can climb the mountain, or as a quantifier, as in a can of Coke. So for the word vapor in Ecclesiastes, we also need to determine the meaning that is implied through the context around the word.
Okay, Mr. Smart Guy, what then is the idea of Havel in chapter 7, verse 15?
In my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing.
This is talking about God's judgment. The idea behind this reality is elusive. Elusive means something that is out of our control or understanding. Just like vapor, you cannot catch it with your hands. God's judgment on the wicked and the righteous may seem elusive to men, but it is never meaningless, because from God's perspective, it is sure to happen in His own time.
Alright, so one of the ideas behind Havel is elusiveness.
Now that you know that there are more than just one idea behind the word Havel, can you guess the idea of Havel in Ecclesiastes chapter 6 verse 12? For who knows what is good for a person in life during the few and vain days they pass through like a shadow? Who can tell them what will happen under the sun after they are gone?
Wait, let me think.
I think it is about temporalness. It really exists, but just for a moment. Just like what the preacher said in Ecclesiastes 6 verse 12. So, life does exist, but it is temporal. Though temporal, life can still be good.
That's right! Remember in Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verse 7, the preacher says, however many years anyone may live, let them enjoy them all.
Awesome. So the second idea behind the word Havel is temporalness. Hey, how about in chapter 4 verses 7 to 8, where it states,
Again, I saw vanity under the sun, one person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, For whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure?
Well, When the preacher is talking about the toil and labor of men as vapor and unhappy business, the word vapor here represents the characteristic of aimlessness. Vapor has no goal or orientation. It flows wherever the wind blows. So the preacher sees toil and labor as aimless if the results of the work are not enjoyed. Aimlessness is the third idea behind the word Havel. Okay, how about in Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 10? He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity.
I think vapor in this context is depicted as non-solid. It means that vapor does not fill up, it does not satisfy as well. Take for example, if you eat vapor, it will not make you full. That is why the preacher says in the passage that money and wealth is not meaningless but unsatisfying.
That's right. So the fourth idea is about unsatisfyingness. The last representation of vapor is the stench that it brings. With that in mind, take a look at Ecclesiastes chapter 4 verse 1. Again, I saw all the oppression that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressor there was power, and there was no one to comfort them.
I think the preacher seems to refer to the suffering of the oppressed as vapor, not because it is meaningless, but it is filthy and smelly. It is not the desired outcome. Okay, so we've talked about the different ideas behind the word Havel, but how does it help us understand the whole book of Ecclesiastes? What does it mean to us Christians in the 21st century?
When the preacher in Ecclesiastes uses the term Havel to describe the reality of the human experiences, he is not being pessimistic or optimistic, because Havel doesn't mean meaningless or vanity. He is using a different characteristic of vapor to illustrate those reality. Basically, he is commenting these life experiences as elusive, temporal, aimless, unfulfilling, and like stench. From this perspective, the book of Ecclesiastes becomes meaningful in showing people the vaporness of their life in order to point them to ultimate meaning and goodness in God, which the preacher concludes in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 13. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man.
And that's what the word Havel is all about.